Have you ever caught yourself giving everything, your time, your energy, your peace, to someone who barely even notices? You're texting first, waiting for their replies, rearranging your life just to fit into theirs, and they still treat you like an afterthought. You start asking yourself, what am I doing wrong? But here's the real question. Why am I giving so much to someone who gives me so little? This isn't just a one-time mistake. For many, it becomes a pattern, an exhausting cycle of chasing validation and calling it love. It's the emotional equivalent of burning yourself out hoping they'll notice the smoke. But let's challenge a belief right now. What if chasing harder isn't the solution? What if silence, not noise, is your greatest weapon? The world tells you to fight for people, to show them your loyalty by never giving up. But that thinking is flawed, even toxic. It's built on the false idea that effort equals value, that the more you give, the more they'll care. But anyone living in the real world, especially those who understand Stoic relationships, knows the truth. The more you chase, the more they pull away. And the more available you make yourself, the less they feel the need to earn you. It's time to break this illusion. There's a different kind of power you haven't tapped into yet. One that doesn't beg, doesn't broadcast, and doesn't wait around hoping to be chosen. It's called stepping back. It's called silence. And when used correctly, it can flip the entire dynamic. This isn't about revenge. It's not about manipulating emotions. It's about stepping into a version of yourself that is calm, grounded, unshakable. Someone who understands Stoicism not just as a philosophy, but as a practice, especially in the realm of love and connection. Today, I'm going to walk you through the inner transformation that begins the moment you stop explaining, stop performing, and stop waiting. Imagine what it would feel like to no longer care whether they notice your absence, because your peace has already arrived in your presence. That's not weakness. That's self-mastery. That's power. This video is your reset button. You're not here to keep playing the game by their rules. You're here to take the script, rip it in half, and write a new one where you are no longer the seeker, but the magnet. One where your silence becomes the loudest statement you'll ever make. So stay with me. We're just getting started. By the end of this, you won't just understand what to do, you'll feel it in your bones. And they'll feel your absence like a storm they never saw coming. 1. Stop seeking validation, own your worth. There comes a point in everyone's emotional journey where they must ask themselves a brutally honest question. Why am I still looking for them to validate me? It's one of those questions that hits hard, not because it's complicated, but because the answer often reveals a truth we've been avoiding. You see, we're taught, consciously or not, that the more someone matters to us, the more we need to earn their affection. That the more effort we put in, the more worthy we become in their eyes. But what if I told you that this belief is backwards? What if constantly chasing validation is precisely what keeps it out of reach? When you're always reaching, always proving, you unknowingly tell the other person, I don't believe I'm enough unless you confirm it. This energy leaks into every text you send, every call you wait for, every compromise you make hoping to stay in their good graces. And the result? They start to believe it too. That your value is tied to their attention. That your identity is incomplete without their presence. But here's the Stoic truth. Your worth is not dependent on anyone's recognition. It is internal, immutable, and entirely yours to claim. This isn't just theory, it's practice. True Stoicism doesn't just guide us in moments of solitude or suffering, it serves as armor in our relationships. It reminds us that external opinions, especially those from people who barely reciprocate, are fleeting. If your peace can be stolen by a delayed reply or an ignored message, then you've handed over the keys to your well-being. It's not just unwise, it's unsustainable. Let's be honest. How many times have you stared at your phone, waiting for their name to pop up? How often have you reread old texts trying to decipher meaning that isn't there? That anxious energy, that uncertainty, it becomes addictive. An addiction to another person's attention is a prison made of invisible bars. It limits your potential. It clips your wings. And worst of all, It convinces you that freedom can only come once they approve of you. But what if freedom has nothing to do with them? What if it begins the moment you stop seeking and start recognizing? Here's the shift. Stop acting like love needs to be earned through sacrifice and desperation. Real love, the kind that aligns with Stoic relationships, doesn't make you beg. It doesn't make you feel like an extra in someone else's movie. It sees your worth clearly, without you needing to perform. There's a strange paradox here, and it's important you understand it. The more you chase someone, the less they value your presence. Why? Because in their mind, you're always available. Always giving. Always forgiving. There's no cost to mistreating you, no consequences to neglecting you. And people rarely value what comes without effort. When you validate them more than you validate yourself, the scale tips, and it tips against you. That imbalance eventually becomes unbearable. Not for them, for you. Stepping back is not weakness. It is not a tactic. It is a recognition that your self-worth cannot be outsourced. When you no longer seek validation, you reclaim authority over your emotions. You're no longer dependent on a text to feel seen or on a compliment to feel appreciated. You begin to understand a fundamental Stoic principle. The only approval that matters is your own. Now ask yourself, have you been living like someone who owns their worth, or like someone waiting for someone else to tell them they're enough? Be honest. The first step is awareness. The next is detachment. Not in the cold, uncaring way, but in the grounded, unshakable way that says, I will no longer place my identity in someone else's hands. That's the kind of detachment that heals. That's what turns the tide. Think of a tree in a storm. It doesn't panic when the winds pick up. It doesn't chase the wind, trying to hold it still. It simply roots itself deeper. That's you now. No more running after people who treat you like an option. No more bending just to be accepted. You are rooted. You are solid. You know your worth, and because of that, you no longer chase, beg, or prove. And here's the beauty in that shift. When you stop trying so hard to be seen, people start to see you. Not because you demanded it, but because your silence, your confidence, your presence speaks louder than any desperate plea ever could. That's the shift we're making. You don't need their validation. You don't need to prove your worth. You already are the proof. When they no longer see you waiting, when they sense you stepped into your power, they begin to question what changed. What happened to the version of you that clung so tightly? The moment you stop needing them, they start needing you. That's not manipulation. That's magnetism. It's what happens naturally when someone who used to seek turns inward and becomes whole. Your silence becomes a mystery. Your absence becomes a weight. And suddenly, you are the one they think about at night. But here's what matters most. By the time they notice, it won't matter. Because you'll be too busy becoming. Too busy growing. Too busy glowing. You won't just be pretending not to care, you genuinely won't. That's the Stoic path. Not numbness. Not coldness. But clarity. Power. Self-respect. Let's be clear, you're not stepping back to make them chase you. You're stepping back because you've stopped chasing anyone who doesn't see your worth on their own. You're not staying silent to punish them. You're staying silent because you don't owe them your noise anymore. That's the difference. This isn't about games. It's about truth. The truth that you were never supposed to beg for love. That the right people will value you without being asked. And the wrong ones? They'll remove themselves. Let them. Ask yourself right now, what would change in my life if I stopped needing them to validate me? How much energy would I get back? How much clearer would I feel? That's the invitation of this moment. To stop looking outward and begin turning inward. To move away from dependence and into dominance, not over others, but over your inner state. That is the real glow-up. Understand this, Stoic strength is not loud. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to convince. It simply is. That's you now. Your silence is not emptiness. It's filled with everything they took for granted. Your distance is not coldness, it's protection. And your refusal to chase? That's your return to power. They may come running. They may not. But here's the truth, it no longer defines you either way. You've stepped into something deeper. Something real. Something that doesn't depend on how anyone else feels about you. That's freedom. That's growth. That's what Stoic relationships are made of, not performance, but presence. Not begging, but boundaries. Not noise, but silence. 2. Reclaim your energy and redirect it inward. There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that creeps in when you've been giving too much for too long. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly drains you. Day by day, you start to feel a little less joyful, a little more scattered. You lose track of your goals, your routines, even your sense of who you were before they took center stage in your mind. You don't realize how much energy you're spending on them, thinking, wondering, checking your phone, analyzing conversations, until you step back and see the void they leave behind. And that void? That's your power source. That's your untapped strength. That's where the shift begins. You've been leaking your energy. Not just emotionally, but mentally, spiritually. Every time you obsess over why they haven't responded, every time you scroll their social media looking for signs, every time you say, yes, when your gut says, no, you're handing over pieces of your power. And you don't get to complain about feeling empty if you keep giving your fire to someone who only brings smoke. So here's the move, cut the leak. Close the tap. And start pouring back into yourself like your soul depends on it, because it does. This isn't about revenge. It's not even about them anymore. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that got lost while you were too busy trying to be enough for someone else. That version of you who used to light up without needing permission? They're still in there. They've just been drowned out by the noise of people who never deserved that much access to you. It's time to tune them out and turn inward. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something purely for you? When was the last time you spent a full day not thinking about their opinion or hoping they'd reach out? When was the last time your energy belonged to you and no one else? If those questions sting, good. That's where the real work starts. Not in pretending to be unbothered. Not in playing mind games. But in consciously choosing to redirect your energy toward things that build you, feed you, and ignite you. Think about all the time you've spent waiting for their texts, their attention, their affection. Imagine if even half of that time had been invested in your goals, your passions, your healing. Where would you be right now? How far could you have gone? That's not a guilt trip, it's a wake-up call. Because here's the deal, the time you've spent on them isn't wasted if you use it as fuel for your return. That's the beauty of Stoicism. It doesn't dwell on what's lost. It focuses on what's within your control, your choices from this moment forward. So what does it look like to redirect your energy? It starts with intention. Instead of reaching for your phone first thing in the morning to check if they've messaged, start your day with silence. Breathe. Move. Read something that elevates your mind. You're not chasing anymore. You're aligning. Instead of using social media as a way to fish for their attention, go silent. Let your absence speak. Your energy is sacred now. It doesn't get spilled for breadcrumbs. Use that energy to build something. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your body. Maybe it's your creativity, or your relationships with people who truly value you. Pour it into routines that ground you, morning rituals, workouts, journaling, focused work. Build your inner empire brick by brick. And as it grows, you'll notice something powerful. The pull they once had over you weakens. Not because they've changed, but because you have. You're no longer available for the games. You've evolved out of them. And let me tell you something they don't expect. They don't expect you to thrive without them. They don't expect you to stop watching, to stop waiting, to stop hoping. So when you do, when you fully step back and pour that same energy inward, it shocks their system. Suddenly, the dynamic flips. You're no longer orbiting their world. You've become your own center of gravity. And they feel it. Even in your silence, they feel it. That's what makes Stoic relationships so transformative. They're not loud, but they're unforgettable. Because nothing is more memorable than someone who once needed you, and now doesn't. You have to understand, the people who drain your energy rarely see the cost until you cut them off. That's when they realize your presence wasn't free, it was an investment. One they took for granted. But this is not about making them see your value. It's about you seeing it first. Once you do, the entire game changes. You'll look back and wonder why you ever waited, why you ever begged, why you ever made yourself small just to fit into someone else's world. This transformation isn't theoretical. It's daily. Every moment you choose to pour into yourself rather than drain yourself for someone else is a victory. It's proof that you are building the kind of life that doesn't depend on anyone's recognition. A life that is full, rich, grounded, and utterly magnetic. And here's the secret no one tells you: when you're no longer focused on them, they start focusing on you. Not because you forced it. Not because you played hard to get. But because true energy, focused, quiet, powerful energy, is impossible to ignore. They'll notice your silence. They'll notice your glow. They'll wonder what happened to the version of you who was always available, always waiting, always hoping. And that wondering? That's when the shift begins. But by the time they notice, you'll be too busy building to care. That's the goal. That's the win. Not their regret, your peace. Not their return, your rise. That's what Stoicism teaches us. That peace isn't found in controlling others. It's found in mastering ourselves. So now I ask you, what are you going to do with all that reclaimed energy? Where will you direct it? What version of yourself are you ready to meet? The one who no longer waits to be chosen but chooses themselves every single time. That version is waiting. And the door opens the moment you stop leaking and start living. Now, if this part of the message hit home for you, if you're ready to take your energy back and build something powerful from the inside out, I want you to do 3 things. First, like this video so the algorithm knows this is the kind of content we need more of. Second, drop a comment below that says, number 1, if you're reclaiming your energy starting today. And third, subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this journey. We're just getting started, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Let's keep going. 3. Silence isn't emptiness, it's strength. Most people misunderstand silence. They think it's weakness, passivity, even surrender. But anyone who's ever practiced real restraint knows the truth. Silence isn't what you do when you're out of options. Silence is what you choose when you've finally realized your power. It's the space between noise and clarity. And in that space, everything changes. Especially when you stop using your voice to be heard, and start using your silence to be felt. Let's get real. The moment you stop explaining, justifying, defending, or chasing, people notice. Not because you're being dramatic, but because you're no longer participating in a script they got used to. They expect a reaction. They expect the follow-up text. They expect the late-night check-in. But when none of that comes, when all they're met with is quiet, it unsettles them. Why? Because your silence says something they can't ignore. I'm not playing this game anymore. And that statement, it's louder than any argument could ever be. When you go quiet, it isn't about ignoring them. It's about removing your emotional labor from someone who never deserved it in the first place. That silence is your boundary, your recovery, your revolution. But here's where it gets interesting. Silence doesn't just speak to them. It speaks to you. The real shift happens internally. You begin to realize how much of your identity was tied up in their responses. How often you measured your worth by their attention. And when you stop reaching out, you start reaching in. You get still. You get focused. You get strong. Because silence doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means you've stopped broadcasting your process. You're still healing. Still building. Still becoming. But you're doing it without the need for an audience. That's what makes it so powerful. And it's why Stoicism puts such high value on control over reaction. When you stop handing out emotional updates to people who abuse your openness, you reclaim your most valuable asset, your inner life. Think about it. How many times have you told people what was wrong, hoping they'd understand, change, apologize? And how many times did they just nod, disappear, or dismiss you? You kept speaking, they kept ignoring, and you kept hoping your clarity would finally unlock theirs. But that cycle? It never works. Not because your words weren't powerful, but because they were wasted on someone who stopped listening a long time ago. That's why silence is the shift. When you stop talking, the echo becomes their responsibility. They're left to fill in the blanks. They're left to wonder, replay, regret. But that's not your goal. Your goal isn't to haunt them, it's to release them. And in doing so, release yourself. Your silence says, I've said enough. I've given enough. I've carried enough. Now I'm choosing peace over performance. There's something deeply stoic about that kind of restraint. About choosing not to react. Not to beg. Not to prove. You become untouchable, not because you're cold, but because you've moved beyond needing anything from them. And that distance, that clarity, becomes your armor. Now here's where the real transformation starts to unfold. As you lean into silence, you start hearing things you couldn't hear before. You hear your intuition. You hear your desires. You hear your fears, yes, but also your resilience. All the noise that came from them, from the drama, from the chasing, it fades. And what's left? You. Raw. Honest. Whole. That's the moment you begin rewriting your story. Because this isn't just about getting over someone. It's about becoming someone. Someone who knows how to be with themselves. Someone who finds strength in solitude. Someone who doesn't need chaos to feel alive. You are not starving for attention anymore. You're not craving closure. You've realized that the person who brings you the most peace is you. And when you operate from that place, when your silence comes from strength, not spite, your energy shifts. People feel it. They may not know what changed, but they know something did. The emotional grip they had on you? Gone. The power of their silence over you? Broken. Because now you're not waiting to be heard, you're choosing what deserves your voice. And most things? Don't. This is the foundation of true Stoic relationships. Not built on need, but on balance. Not on noise, but on depth. Two people who don't control each other, who don't depend on constant validation, who don't fear silence, but respect it. And if the relationship you were in couldn't hold space for that kind of silence, it was never strong to begin with. But silence doesn't just shift the external, it reprograms you internally. You start realizing how much of your identity was wrapped in reaction. How your highs and lows weren't yours. They were responses to someone else's inconsistency. When they texted, your mood lifted. When they ignored you, you spiraled. That's not peace. That's dependence. So now you unplug. You detach. Not out of anger, but clarity. Your silence becomes a reset button. A cleansing. You let go of the noise, the neediness, the explaining. You walk away from situations that demand your peace as payment. And you stop auditioning for people who should have already known your worth. And guess what happens next? They start to wonder. They start to spiral. They check your stories. They scroll your feed. They think about reaching out. But here's the beautiful part, by then, you won't care. Not because you've moved on out of spite, but because you've moved up out of necessity. You are not punishing them with your silence. You are prioritizing yourself through it. This is a lifestyle now. A principle. A philosophy. Not just something you do for a few days to spark curiosity. You've tasted peace. And you're not giving it up just to get a reply. Your silence becomes your sanctuary. Your clarity becomes your compass. And that energy? It draws people in. But only the right ones. Because only those who respect silence can truly understand your depth. Let me ask you, how much more powerful would you be if you stopped needing to explain yourself? What if you didn't respond to every message? What if you didn't post every thought, every emotion, every move? What if mystery became your strength, and self-control your signature? That's the path you're on now. The path of the quiet storm. Calm on the surface, unshakable underneath. You're not seeking attention. You're commanding it, without saying a word. Because your presence, your absence, your transformation, it speaks for itself. And if they come back? Good. Let them find you changed. Let them find you grounded. Let them wonder what happened to the version of you who used to chase. And when they ask, when they try to reconnect, you won't need to explain. Your silence already said everything. That's power. That's freedom. That's stoicism in action. 4. Keep them in the dark, on purpose. Let's talk about the power of the unknown, the force that's created not by what you say, but by what you don't. Because as much as people act like they want transparency, constant updates, and open communication, the truth is, people crave mystery. They respect what they can't predict. They're drawn to what they don't fully understand. And when you remove your emotional availability, your constant updates, your running commentary on every thought and feeling, they feel it. Deeply. Even if they don't say it out loud. You used to be an open book. Always explaining yourself. Always trying to make sure they understood you. Always trying to keep the connection alive through constant sharing. But that openness? It became routine. Predictable. They stopped valuing it because they never had to earn it. But now, something's changed. You've closed the book. You've shut the door. And suddenly, they're curious again. But this time, you're not giving them the answers. Keeping them in the dark isn't about revenge. It's about restoring balance. You're no longer volunteering access to someone who took you for granted. You're no longer giving away pieces of yourself just because they showed up. And that shift, it breaks patterns. It rewrites dynamics. Because now, they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know where you stand. And that unknown? It eats at them. You might think, but shouldn't I be open? Shouldn't I share how I feel? And yes, when you're dealing with someone who's earned that trust, absolutely. But not with someone who used your openness as a tool to manipulate, to maintain control, or worse, to keep you close without ever committing. That kind of person doesn't deserve front row access to your inner world. Not anymore. And let's be clear, keeping them in the dark doesn't mean ghosting. It doesn't mean acting out or disappearing to create drama. It means stepping into a place where your life, your thoughts, your progress belong to you. It means you post less. You reply slower. You share sparingly. Not because you're trying to play games, but because you're building boundaries. Strong ones. And the result? They start to question everything. They used to know your routines, your patterns, when you'd reach out, what you'd say. But now, the script is gone. You're unpredictable. And unpredictability breeds attention. Not because you're chasing it, but because people always want what they can't control. This is what happens when you stop performing. You stop living your life to be seen. You stop oversharing in hopes they'll understand you better. You stop trying to guide their perception. And that silence? That locked door? It becomes your power. It becomes the mirror they have to look into, without your help. Let me ask you this. How much of your energy has been wasted keeping someone else updated on your emotions? How many times did you type out a long message, trying to explain yourself? How many times did you hope that if they just understood, they'd change? But did they? Or did they just take your clarity as a license to keep you close without ever really committing? That's the lie we tell ourselves. If they just knew how I felt, they'd treat me better. But here's the truth. People don't change because of your words. They change because of your absence. Because of your standards. Because of the silence that forces them to sit with the consequences of how they treated you. So what does it look like to keep them in the dark on purpose? It means your posts become less personal. More focused on growth. You don't subtweet. You don't hint. You don't try to make them guess how you're feeling. You simply live. Boldly. Quietly. Without giving them a play-by-play. They ask, "What's new with you?" And you say, "Not much." They reach out, fishing for emotion, and you keep it neutral. Calm. Detached. Because the real power move isn't ignoring them. It's not needing to be understood by them anymore. It's moving forward without their clarity, without their permission, and without their validation. And when you do that, they feel the shift. They feel the gap. And they start to panic. Here's what they won't tell you: they got comfortable knowing everything about you. They liked having emotional access. Even if they weren't fully invested, they still enjoyed the feeling of being wanted. But now, that access is gone. And they don't know what's going on. Are you seeing someone new? Have you moved on? Do you still think about them? They don't know. And that uncertainty, it drives curiosity. And curiosity? That's the seed of desire. But here's the beautiful part. By the time their desire blooms, you've already outgrown the garden. You're not doing this to get them back. You're doing this because you realize something sacred. Not everyone deserves to know your story. Not everyone deserves access to your growth, your plans, your light. Especially not someone who didn't respect it when it was freely given. And that's what Stoic relationships are all about. Not broadcasting pain. Not demanding attention. But building strength in silence. Creating a life that doesn't rely on being seen to feel real. You become the storm that moves quietly, but leaves everything changed. And as you stay quiet, focused, and intentional, you'll notice something incredible. You'll begin to breathe easier. You'll feel more centered, less reactive, more in control. Because the chaos they brought into your life, it can't reach you anymore. You've stepped behind the curtain, into your own sanctuary. And in that sacred space you rebuild. You start journaling, meditating, reading, creating. You start prioritizing peace over presence. Not everyone needs to know where you are, what you're doing, or how you feel. Those who matter won't need a map. They'll trust the process. And those who only want you when you're convenient, they'll fade out. Let them. Ask yourself this: what would it feel like to live a life that isn't constantly broadcasted? What if your progress didn't need applause? What if your healing was private, and sacred, and strong? What if your silence didn't signal weakness, but power? That's what we're stepping into now. You are no longer explaining yourself to people who misunderstood you on purpose. You are no longer breaking your own boundaries to maintain someone else's comfort. You are no longer offering updates to someone who didn't earn a front row seat in your story. You are rising, quietly, steadily, deeply. And they're left to wonder. They're left to scroll. They're left to feel the absence of your energy, the absence of your emotional labor, your check-ins, your presence. And that space? That distance? It teaches them what your words never could. Because at the end of the day, the most powerful thing you can do isn't yell, beg, or prove. It's vanish. Not physically, but energetically. To no longer orbit someone who made you feel small. To no longer center someone who never prioritized you. To become your own gravity. That's what silence gives you. It gives you your center back. It allows you to grow without interference. To shine without distraction. And eventually your silence becomes so powerful, so self-sustained, that even if they do come back, it doesn't matter. Because you've already moved on to better, higher, clearer ground. So if this part of the message resonated with you, if you're done explaining, done broadcasting, done keeping someone updated who never really cared, then do this right now. Like this video to affirm your shift. Comment, number 1, below to mark the moment you started living more quietly and more powerfully. And subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this series. We're building something unshakable here. And trust me, what comes next will change the game for good. 5. Say no and mean it. There's a moment in everyone's journey when the word no becomes more than a rejection. It becomes a declaration. A boundary. A decision to protect your peace rather than hand it away to anyone who asks. You see, too often we treat no like it's a dangerous word, something to be used sparingly, gently, padded with apologies and explanations. But the truth is, when you finally understand your worth, no becomes sacred. Not because you're trying to push people away, but because you're no longer willing to let them pull you apart. You've said yes too many times. Yes to conversations that drained you. Yes to plans that didn't serve you. Yes to people who only showed up when they needed something from you. You did it because you were afraid. Afraid of being seen as selfish. Afraid of missing out. Afraid of conflict. But here's what they never told you. Every yes you said to them was a no you whispered to yourself. A no to your needs. A no to your growth. A no to your sanity. And now? That era is over. You're not afraid of your own boundaries anymore. You're not afraid to draw the line. You're not afraid to be misunderstood, because you've finally realized that being understood is not worth sacrificing your self-respect. That's the Stoic way. Not to shut yourself off from the world, but to choose carefully where your energy flows. To say no with conviction. Not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of preservation. Let me ask you something personal. How many times have you felt resentment after saying yes? How many times have you agreed to something you didn't want to do, only to end up exhausted, bitter, or used? That's not kindness. That's self-abandonment. That's people-pleasing dressed up as virtue. And the more you do it, the more others expect it. Because people don't respect what you tolerate, they exploit it. So when you say no now, say it clearly. Say it calmly. Say it with full ownership. No apologies. No long explanations. No justifications to ease their disappointment. Because if someone's disappointed by your boundary, they were benefiting from your lack of one. And that's not your guilt to carry. Think about this. What kind of life could you build if you stopped saying yes out of fear? If you stopped defaulting to approval seeking? What if your time was protected like it mattered? What if your energy wasn't up for grabs? You've been conditioned to believe that saying no makes you difficult. But I'll tell you what really makes you difficult: being the one who's always available, always agreeable, always bending. Because people don't take you seriously. They don't value your time. They assume you'll always make room for them, even when you're running on empty. But now you're different. Now your no has weight. Because it's backed by clarity. You know who you are. You know what you want. And you're no longer afraid to turn down what doesn't align with that. This is your life. Not a community project. Not an emotional daycare. You're not here to carry everyone else's comfort at the expense of your own. And the beauty is, once you start saying no, you start to see who really respects you. The people who matter won't guilt you. They won't try to negotiate your boundaries. They'll understand. They'll adjust. And if they don't, that's your signal. That's the gift of no. It reveals who's really on your side. You'll also notice something else. The more you say no to what doesn't serve you, the more room you create for what does. You're not just protecting yourself from harm. You're opening space for peace, for purpose, for progress. Every no to something unaligned is a yes to something sacred. And let's be honest, saying no isn't always easy. It's uncomfortable. Especially at first. Especially when you're breaking habits that have kept you small. But discomfort is not the enemy. Discomfort is the doorway. And on the other side? Freedom. So let me ask again. What have you been tolerating that you need to say no to? What relationships, routines, requests have been draining you, silently eating away at your power? And why haven't you drawn the line yet? Is it fear? Fear of losing someone? Fear of disappointing them? But here's the truth. If your yes is keeping you miserable, it's not saving the relationship, it's slowly killing your soul. And a relationship that depends on you silencing yourself isn't worth keeping. The Stoics teach us that our time is our most precious asset. Once spent, it can't be earned back. So why are you giving it to people who treat it like it's disposable? Why are you letting guilt shape your schedule? Your calendar is not a canvas for other people's chaos. It's your sacred space to build the life you want. Imagine what your week would look like if you only said yes to what truly nourished you. Imagine the peace of waking up without dread. The freedom of knowing that every decision you made honored your growth. That's what happens when your no becomes non-negotiable. And this isn't just about relationships. It's about every area of your life. Work, family, friends, social obligations. You don't owe everyone your presence. You don't need to be everything for everyone. The people who love you will understand that your no is not a rejection, it's a reflection of self-respect. And those who can't handle it, let them leave. Because you're not afraid of being alone anymore. You've tasted solitude, and you've found strength in it. You've learned that your worth doesn't come from how many people you please. It comes from how deeply you honor your own needs. And when you honor yourself, the right people show up. The ones who don't need you to break yourself and have to love them. So here's your challenge. The next time someone asks for your time, your energy, your emotional labor, pause. Ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Or am I saying yes out of guilt? And if it's not a full body yes, make it a full stop no. You'll feel the shift instantly. That weight? Gone. That tension? Released. That exhaustion? Replaced with power. And over time, your life will start to reflect your standards. Your relationships will deepen. Your energy will rise. Your direction will sharpen. Because now you're not scattered. You're focused. You're aligned. This is what true power looks like. Not loud. Not aggressive. But firm. Rooted. Stoic. Saying no not just to others, but to the old version of yourself that thought being liked was more important than being respected. You're rewriting your story. And in this new chapter, you are no longer the one who bends. You are the one who builds. And you build with purpose. With presence. With boundaries that protect your peace at all costs. That's the path of strength. That's the code of clarity. That's the embodiment of stoicism in relationships. Not controlled by emotion, not led by fear, but guided by inner truth. 6. Become emotionally untouchable. If there's one thing that flips the dynamic in any relationship, especially those rooted in power imbalance, mixed signals, or emotional manipulation, it's this: becoming emotionally untouchable. Not cold, not numb, but grounded, steady, unshakable. The kind of emotional control that doesn't just change how you interact with others, it changes who you are. It redefines your baseline. And it ensures no one can play with your peace again. This kind of inner strength is not something you're born with. It's something you build. Layer by layer. Scar by scar. Lesson by lesson. You get there after enough sleepless nights. Enough one-sided conversations. Enough moments where someone else's mood dictated your whole day. You get tired. Not in a defeated way, but in a powerful, awakening way. You finally say, I can't keep living on this emotional roller coaster. I need to get off. And so you begin. Slowly at first. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing clarity from people who only offer confusion. You stop reacting to their silence, their inconsistency, their games. Instead, you observe. You breathe. You respond not from impulse, but from intention. That's the shift. That's the power. Emotional detachment isn't indifference, it's discipline. It's the ability to care without collapsing, to feel without falling apart, to love without losing yourself. You don't shut down. You just stop giving people the remote control to your nervous system. You start living from the inside out, not the outside in. Let's talk about what that looks like in practice. When they ghost you, you don't spiral. You acknowledge it. You take the data at face value. Someone who values you shows up. Consistently. Period. No more overthinking. No more blaming yourself. You don't need to analyze what silence means. You let it speak for itself. When they breadcrumb you, just enough attention to keep you hoping, but never enough to feel secure. You don't bite. You don't thank them for crumbs when you deserve the whole damn table. You stop rewarding inconsistency with access. You raise the bar. Quietly. Permanently. When they test your limits, try to provoke a reaction, Push your buttons, throw subtle jabs to see if they still have power. You stay still. Calm. Unmoved. Because your peace is not up for grabs anymore. Not today. Not ever again. This is what it means to become emotionally untouchable. To own your triggers. To choose your responses. To create such a deep inner world that external noise can't reach your core. And guess what? People feel that. Even if they don't understand it, they feel it. Your new energy shifts the room. It confuses those who once relied on your reactivity. And it attracts those who recognize true presence. Because when you're no longer controlled by emotion, you become a magnet. You become rare. You stop being the emotional safety net for people who wouldn't catch you if the roles were reversed. You stop dancing for their approval. And in that stillness, that poise, that power, you rise. Now let's be honest, it takes practice. You'll slip. You'll feel the urge to double text, to justify yourself, to react out of habit. That's okay. Just catch it. Breathe. Step back. You're not failing, you're unlearning. You're rewiring. You're rebuilding a nervous system that used to fire in panic, and now learns to rest in peace. In strength. So how do you know you're getting there? You know because things that used to wreck you barely move you now. Their silence no longer feels like punishment. It feels like space. Their inconsistency no longer feels like a mystery. It feels like data. Their drama no longer feels like a challenge. It feels like a waste of time. That's what Stoic relationships are built on, not chaos, but calm. Not power struggles, but shared strength. You don't lose yourself trying to prove your worth. You don't bleed to show you care. You don't sacrifice your center to keep the connection alive. You hold. You ground. You remain. And what about love, you ask? Can you still love deeply and be emotionally untouchable? Absolutely. In fact, that's the only way to love without losing yourself. Because now your love comes from fullness, not fear. It's not performance, it's presence. You give, but you don't chase. You care, but you don't collapse. You open your heart, but your peace remains non-negotiable. That's the kind of love that lasts. The kind of love that draws the right people toward you, not out of pity or control, but out of deep, aligned resonance. Because they sense it, you are not here to be played with. You are not available for emotional games. You are not a puppet pulled by strings of guilt, hope, or desperation. You are the one holding the strings now. And you've let them all go. So let me ask you right here, right now, what would change in your life if you stopped reacting? If you stopped waiting for people to do the right thing, and simply moved on when they didn't? What would it feel like to walk away without needing closure? To protect your heart without building a wall? To love yourself so fully that rejection didn't shake you? That is what you're building now. Not just a new relationship with others, but a new relationship with yourself. You don't just talk about self-respect, you practice it. Daily. And that practice builds a fortress around your peace. One no one can enter unless you open the gates. And they feel the shift. They see your silence, your composure, your distance. And they don't know what to do with it. The person who used to beg is gone. The person who used to react is gone. The person who used to explain is gone. You've replaced performance with presence, desperation with dignity, need with knowing. And here's the final truth. By the time they figure out what they lost, you'll have already built a life so powerful, so aligned, so full, that their return won't even register. Not because you don't care, but because you've risen so far beyond the old pattern that there's no version of you that would go back. This is emotional freedom. This is Stoicism not as a theory, but as a lived experience. This is what happens when you step back, stay silent, and stop giving away your peace to people who never deserved it. So if this final part of the message spoke to you, if you're ready to become emotionally untouchable, grounded, and truly at peace, then take the step. Like this video to affirm your new direction. Comment, number 1, below if this is your moment of reclaiming your calm. And subscribe to stay connected, Because this journey of power, purpose, and peace is just getting started. It's been a journey, one not marked by external noise but by an internal awakening. By now, you've come face to face with the truth that many spend a lifetime avoiding. Your peace is not a luxury. It is a responsibility. A responsibility to protect, preserve, and prioritize. And every time you've handed it over for the sake of approval, attention, or validation, you've felt the consequences. Deep in your gut. In the form of fatigue, disconnection, emptiness. But not anymore. What you've done here is not a surface-level transformation. It's not a change of tactics. It's a rewiring of identity. You've moved from emotional dependence to emotional discipline. From constant reaction to measured response. From chasing to choosing. From noise to stillness. That shift? That's not casual. That's not cosmetic. That's revolutionary. And here's what makes it so powerful. No one had to see it for it to be real. You didn't need applause. You didn't need permission. You didn't wait for the timing to be right. You simply decided. You took your attention back. You took your silence back. You took yourself back. And in doing so, you stepped into a rare energy, one that few ever embody in a world addicted to drama and validation. You became the one who watches instead of reacts. The one who moves with intention instead of impulse. The one who no longer needs to be chased, understood, or chosen, because they already are. By themselves. What does that make you? It makes you the one they remember. The one whose silence echoes. The one whose absence disrupts. Not because you vanished to play games, but because you returned to your own life with such intensity that theirs could no longer compete. That's the thing about choosing yourself deeply. Once you do, everything else must rise to meet you, or fall away. So now you walk differently. Not faster. Not louder. But with presence. With weight. With calm. And people feel it. They feel that you're not looking to be saved, not begging to be seen. You've stopped waiting for someone else to name your value. You already know what you bring. And because of that, you no longer cling. You no longer perform. You no longer apologize for choosing peace over presence. And what happens next? They start to notice. Not just your absence, but the new energy around you. The stillness. The glow. The direction. They see someone they once had easy access to now becoming someone who chooses their access carefully. And that rattles them. That humbles them. But more importantly, it frees you. Because whether they return or not doesn't matter anymore. The victory was never in their apology, their attention, or their regret. The victory was always in your shift. The quiet, personal, unstoppable shift from being someone who waits, to someone who walks. From someone who pleads, to someone who protects. From someone who explains, to someone who simply moves on. And you didn't have to slam a door to do it. You didn't have to scream. You didn't have to prove anything. You just stopped participating in patterns that hurt you. You stopped being the character they cast you as. You wrote a new role. A leading one. With fewer lines but more power. Fewer scenes but more control. You stopped chasing what was never meant to be caught. You stopped shrinking to be digestible. You stopped trying to be someone's almost. You stopped being the placeholder. The backup. The second choice. Because now you know, your worth isn't up for negotiation. It's not a question. It's a statement. And it shows in your silence. And so, the story changes. Not with a dramatic finale, but with a calm departure. You left the room emotionally, not because you weren't invested, but because you realized you were the only one truly showing up. You realized that waiting for someone to treat you right is not love, it's delay. And delay is not affection. It's avoidance. So you stopped waiting. You stopped interpreting crumbs as interest. You stopped translating confusion into hope. You stopped mistaking attention for affection. You started seeing things clearly, not through the fog of desperation, but through the lens of discernment. And when you did, everything became obvious. They were never confused. They were just comfortable. Comfortable knowing you'd always be there. But now you're not. Now you're focused on you. And not in the cliché way. In the real, grounded, stoic relationships kind of way. Where you no longer need to announce your healing. You just embody it. Where your silence isn't for show, it's for safety. Where your standards aren't revenge, they're protection. That's the kind of healing that doesn't just close wounds. It builds armor. Not to keep love out, but to make sure only the right kind gets in. The kind that doesn't need to be chased. The kind that doesn't play games. The kind that doesn't fear silence, but respects it. Because in your silence, you found something priceless. You found you. The real you. The one who was buried under expectations, noise, neediness. The one who thought love had to hurt. The one who thought worth had to be earned. That version is gone now. Replaced by someone who knows that real connection doesn't require suffering. That peace is not a prize, it's a prerequisite. And as you move forward, you'll attract differently. Not because you're trying, but because your new energy filters everything. It filters out the takers, the players, the manipulators. It makes you invisible to chaos and magnetic to clarity. You become a mirror, reflecting exactly what someone is ready for. And for those who aren't ready, they walk away. And you let them. Quietly. Peacefully. Powerfully. You've stopped auditioning. You've stopped proving. You've stopped waiting for someone to wake up. And now, you're wide awake. To your own beauty. To your own power. To your own direction. And no matter what happens, you know one thing. You'll never go back to being someone who begs to be chosen. Because you've already chosen yourself. And that choice? That was the breakthrough. So step into this next season with reverence. With confidence. With stillness. Let your actions speak louder than your explanations. Let your absence be a lesson. Let your silence echo louder than your presence ever could. Because now you know, power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply steps back, stays silent, and lets the world come to terms with what it lost. You've done the work. You've made the shift. And now, all that's left, is to live it. With clarity. With calm. With conviction. This is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of one written entirely on your terms. One shaped by intention, protected by boundaries, and powered by peace. And they'll feel it. Whether they come running or not, doesn't matter anymore. You've already won.